I felt his fingers trace slowly across my skin, measured, deliberate, as the lights of Las Vegas shimmered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse suite. 3 floors below, my husband nursed a glass of whiskey at the bar, completely unaware that his most important client had just asked me to stay. The silk dress I'd worn to dinner clung to me like second skin as Grayson stepped closer, his presence thickening the air between us. "You know, this changes everything," he murmured, his breath grazing the side of my neck. I should have walked away. I should have said no. But when his hands found my waist, all I could think about was how long it had been since someone looked at me like I was the only thing in the room that mattered. The evening had started with nothing but good intentions. My husband, Mark, had asked me to join him for dinner with a potential investor, Grayson Wells, a man whose money could change everything for Mark's startup. "Just be your charming self," he'd said, straightening his tie in our hotel room mirror. "This deal could be the beginning of our future." I'd chosen my dress with care, black silk, tasteful, feminine, but not flashy. It said I belonged in the room, but wasn't there to beg for attention. Grayson was already waiting when we arrived, seated at the rooftop restaurant, Las Vegas, glittering all around him like a crown. I understood instantly why Mark had been so desperate to impress him. Tall, confident, silver at his temples, eyes sharp and unsettling, like he already knew the ending to the story we were only just beginning. He stood to greet us, took my hand in his. "You must be Ava," he said, voice like velvet. "Mark didn't mention how stunning you are." Mark laughed. I saw the flicker of tension in his jaw dot throughout dinner. I played the part flawlessly, poised, engaging, asking Grayson thoughtful questions about his investment strategy, slipping in stories from my event planning business just enough to seem relevant but not attention-seeking. But underneath it all, something stirred. There was a pull in Grayson's gaze, a current beneath the surface. His fingers brushed mine when he poured the wine. His eyes lingered longer than they should have. Every time Mark left the table to take a call, it felt like the room shifted. "Your wife is remarkable," Grayson said once, his eyes locked on mine, even as he spoke to Mark. "Intelligent, accomplished, beautiful. You're a lucky man." My skin flushed. I reached for my glass. I knew this was dangerous, the kind of flirtation that could destroy everything. And yet, I couldn't deny how alive I felt. By the time dessert arrived, Mark was buzzing, talking fast, eyes gleaming with hope, throwing out projections and dreams like confetti. Grayson listened patiently, smiling, but I saw how often his attention drifted back to me. Then, casually, he leaned back in his chair and said, "Mark, this has been enlightening. I'd like to continue the discussion, maybe go over some projections in more detail. I have some documents upstairs we could look at." Mark perked up immediately. This was it, the moment he'd been waiting for. Then Grayson looked at me, double quotes, "Ava, I'd love your input too. With your background, your perspective on the marketing strategy could be invaluable." Mark's hand squeezed mine under the table. A silent plea. "Say yes, help me seal this deal." So I said yes. Even though somewhere deep in my stomach, I knew this wasn't about marketing. Grayson's suite was everything you'd imagine, expansive, opulent, with 360-degree views of the Strip, a world far removed from the one we lived in below. While Mark spread out his laptop and charts, Grayson poured drinks. Then he drifted over to where I stood by the windows, watching the city pulse like a living thing. "Quite a view," he said, handing me a glass of champagne. His shoulder brushed mine. That spark again, immediate, unavoidable. Mark was already deep into his pitch, animated, persuasive, pouring out every hope he'd ever had. Grayson sat back, letting him talk, but I could feel where his attention truly was. He wasn't just analyzing numbers, he was watching me, feeling the unspoken space between us. "The numbers are solid," he said, once Mark had finished, "but I need to understand the human side, the passion behind the project." His eyes found mine again, Ava, what drew you to all this? Event planning, what drives you to create experiences for people? The question caught me off guard with its intimacy. I found myself talking about the thrill of bringing people together of crafting mints that would linger in memory long after the last guest had gone home. Grayson listened with an intensity that made my skin warm, asking follow-up questions that showed he was truly hearing me, not just making conversation. Mark began to fidget, checking his phone repeatedly. I should call Febabasitor, he said finally. Check on the kids. Grayson and Meck urged with possibility you're wasted in that marriage, he said quietly, his voice barely above. I'd been trying Tasso Press for months. Mark was a good mana devoted father, but somewhere along the way, we'd become more like business partners than lovers. When was the last time he'd looked at me the way Grayson was looking at me now? You don't know anything about my marriage, I replied, but me. Voice lacked conviction. Grayson stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and intoxicating that made my head spinny. Know that a woman like you should beckerished, he said, his hand coming up to brush a strand of hair from my face, ripped, made to feel like the goddessy, or his thumb traced along my cheekbone, and I felt my breath catch. This was wrong, so wrong, but I couldn't seem to step away. The warmth of his stoush, the intensity in his eyes. It had been so long since anyone had made me feel truly seen, truly desired. Through the window, I could see Mark pacing on the balcony, gesturing animatedly into his phone. He was probably smoothing over some minor crisis at home, playing the beautiful husband and father, while I stood here, drowning in the attention of fan of the man. Guilt and desire war in my gist. But when Grayson's hand slid down to cut my jaw, desire one, tell me toast top. He whispered, his lips barely an inch from mine, tell me this is wrong, and deal back away right now. We'll pretend this conversation never happened, and deal write your husband his check tomorrow morning. But I couldn't form the words. Instead, I found myself leaning Jinto, his touch my body. Making a choice of me mind wasn't ready to acknowledge it. Take kiss was electric, sending shockwaves through my entire body. His lips were firm and warm, moving against mine with a confidence that made my knees wake. I melted into him, my hands fisting in his shirt as years of neglected dash-in came roaring to life. He tasted like whiskey and possibility, like everything I'd been missing without even knowing it. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, I could see Mark through's window, still lost in his phone call. He doesn't see you, Grayson murmured against my ear, his words sending shivers down my spine. Not the way I do, not the way you deserve to be seen. His hand settled on my waist, pulling me closer. I could feel the heat of his body through the thin silk of my dress. This is insane, I whispered, but even as I said it, I was pressing closer, craving more of his touch. If Mark finds out, Mark won't find out, Grayson assured Mess's lips, finding the sensitive spot just below my ear. This stays between us, just a night, just this moment. His hands were moving now, sliding along my sides, mapping the curves of my body through silk. Every touch sent fire racing through my veins, awakening nerve-ending side forgotten existed. I knew I should have stopped this. I knew I should push him away, torn to my husband's side, pretend this moment had never happened. But when Grayson's fingers found the zipper aft back of my dress, when he began to lower it with agonizing slowness, I was lost. The cool air of the sweet kissed my newly exposed skin, and I shivered, not from cold, but from the intensity of his gaze as he took in every inch of me beautiful. He breathed, his hands skimming over my bare shoulders, leaving trails of fire in their wake. Absolutely beautiful, guided me backward until my legs hit edge of the plush sofa, his eyes never leaving mine. Are you sure about this? I should have said no. I should have grabbed my dress and run instead. I reached for his shirt, my fingers working at the buttons with trembling hands. I've never been more sure of anything you whispered, and meant it. This might be wrong, might be a betrayal of everything it's promised to be, but in this moment, it felt like the most honest thing I'd done in years. Grayson's shirt fell, aware of a chest that spoke of regular words and careful attention to his booty. My hands explored the expanse, of warm skin, marveling at the contrast between His polished exterior and thorough masculinity beneath he grown soft, yet my touch his own hands, growing bolder, more demanding the dress pulled. At my feet, leaving me in nothing but the lace undergarments. I'd chosen more for myself than for Mark's benefit. Grayson's eyes darkened as he took me in his gaze, both reverent and hungry. "You're perfect," has said, his voice rough with desire. "Absolutely perfect." He lifted me easily, settling me on the sofa with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with urgency building between us. His lips found mine again, deeper, this time more demanding. I could taste the desperation in his kiss, the same need that was clawing at my chest. This wasn't just physical attraction, it was recognition, a meeting of souls that had been searching for each other without knowing it. Hismith traced a path down my throat, finding the hollow at the base, where my pulse fluttered like a trapped bird. Every kiss, every gentle nip of his teeth sent waves of sensation crashing through my arched beneath him, my body responding to his touch in ways I'd almost forgotten were possible. His hands were everywhere, tracing the curve of my waist, skimming along my thighs, leaving breathless and wanting more through the haze of desire. I was dimly aware of Mark's voice, still carrying from Thebalcony, discussing pickup times and bedtime routines with the babysitter. They juxtaposition was jarring. My husband managing the mundane details of our life while I discovered new dimensions off leisure. Just yards away, guilt flickered through me, but it was quickly consumed by the fire Grayson was building in my blood. His fingers found the clasp of my bra, and I held my breath as he released it, the lace falling away to expose me completely to his gaze. Gorgeous. Hemmermured, his hands cupping me reverently bore. His mouth followed the sensation off. His lips on my skin was overwhelming, waves of heat and pleasure cascading through my body until I could barely think, barely breathe. I was lost in a world of sensation. The warmth of his myth, the gentleness of his hands, the way he seemed to know exactly how to touch me to make me come undone. Every caress was deliberate, purposefulest, signet to bring me maximum pleasure. This wasn't the hurried, perfunctory intimacy that had become the norm in my marriage. This was worship, adoration, think into focused attention that made me feel like the center of the universe. My hands tangled in his hair as he continued his exploration, my body arcing toward him, instinctively seeking more contact, more sensation. The city lights twinkled beyond the windows, but they seemed to fade into insignificance comp to the fireworks exploding beneath my skin. I was dimly aware that I was making sounds, soft gasps and Mondstadt seemed to echo in the luxurious space, but I was beyond caring about property or discretion. Grayson's touch grew more insistent, more demanding, and if felt myself spiraling towards something magnificent and terrifying. The tension built within me, coiling tighter and tighter until I thought, I might shatter from the intensity. And then, just as I teetered on the edge of release, a hard sliding door to the balcony opened. "Sorry about that." Mark's voice carried a cruise, the sweet crisis at home. "Yauk know how it is." I froze, panic flooding me system as reality crashed back over. Grayson moved with lightning speed, pulling a throw blanket over me as he stood, somehow managing to make it look like he'd simply been showing me the view from the windows. "No problem at all," Grayson replied smoothly, his voice betraying none of the passion that had filled it moments before. Ava was just admiring the city lights. "Quite spectacular from up here." He moved to Theber, pouring himself a drink with steady hands while I struggled to control my breathing, to make sense of what had just happened. Mark appeared in the living area, his tie loosened, looking every inch harried. "Businessman, everything okay here?" he asked, glancing between Grayson and me. I managed to smile, hoping it looked more natural than it felt, just taking in the view. I said, my voice slightly breathless, "It really is incredible up here." Mark nodded, absent-mindedly, turning his attention back to his presentation materials. The moment felt surreal. My husband discussing Invis strategies while my body still hummed with unfulfilled desire while Grayson's taste still lingered on my lips. "I should probably get Ava back to our room," Mark said, checking his watch. "Early flight tomorrow, and she's had a long day." Grayson nodded understandingly. I caught the flash of disappointment in his eyes, the same ache I felt in my chest. "Of course," he said graciously. "Thank you both for a lovely evening. I'll have my assistant contact you about the next steps." Mark, he walked us to the door, Hishand, briefly touching my lower back. Ash said goodbye, a touch so light Mark wouldn't notice, but one that sent electricity racing through my system. All same in the elevator, Mark was practically vibrating with excitement. You see how he responded to the Q4 projections? I think we really impressed him. "This could be it, Ava. This could be everything we've been working toward." And nodded and made the appropriate sounds. But my mind was still in that suit, still feeling Grayson's hands on my skin, still tasting his kiss on my lips. Back in our room, Mark was too wired to sleep, pacing and making notes about follow-up strategies. I excused myself to the bathroom, needing a moment to collect myself to process what had happened. Inth mirror, I looked like a woman who'd been thoroughly kissed, my lips slightly swilling, my eyes bright with residual desire. I splashed cool water on my face, trying to wash away the evidence of my betrayal, but I could still feel Grayson's touch like a brand on my skin. When I emerged, Mark was finally settling into bed, his excitement giving way to exhaustion. He reached for me automatically, his touch familiar, but somehow different. Now lighter, less purposeful than Grayson's had been. "Thank you for tonight," he murmured against my hair, "for being perfect, for helping me seal this deal. I love you." The words hit me like a physical blow. Where was my husband? Thanking me for my faithfulness while I'd spent the evening in other man's arms. The guilt was overwhelming, but beneath it lurked something else, a hunger that hadn't been answered, a need that hadn't been met. As Mark drifted off to sleep beside me, I stared at the ceiling, my body still aching with unfulfilled desire. Sleep eluded me every time I closed my eyes. I saw Grayson's face, felt his hands on my skin, heard his voice whispering that I deserved to be were ripped. The rational part of my mind knew this was dangerous. New thought, pursuing whatever had started between us, could destroy everything Mark and I had built together. But the woman in me, the woman who'd been neglected, taken for granted, reduced to a supporting role in her own life, craved more of what Grayson had offered. Around 2 a.m. my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Can't sleep either." Jemmy heart raced as I stared at the image, knowing I should delete its hold, pretend I'd never seen it. Instead, I found myself typing back, "No, can't stop thinking." Its response came immediately, saying, "You're haunting me." The words sent a thrill through me that ATH tried desperately to suppress. This was madness. I was lying next to my sleeping husband, texting with another man about thoughts that could destroy my marriage. But I couldn't seem to stop myself. "This is crazy." I typed back. "Razzie doesn't begin to cover it," came his reply. "But I can't forget how you felt in me arms, how you tasted, how you responded to." My touch heat flooded my body at his words, and I had to bite back a moan. Mark shifted beside me, and I held my breath, terrified he would wake up and see the evidence of my betrayal glowing on my phone screen. "We can't," I typed, though the words felt hollow even as I sent them. "Can't we?" You felt it too. That connection, thought chemistry. When was the last time Sumeone touched you like you were a precious, like you were the only woman in the world? His words cut straight to the heart of my loneliness, my neglect, my desperate need to feel desired. I stared at the phone for long minutes, knowing that my next response would determine everything. I could end this now, delete his number, pretend this had never happened, or I could take the leap into something dangerous and exhilarating and potentially devastating. Room 1247. It ebbed before I could lose my nerve. Give him 10 minutes. The wait felt eternal. I slipped from bed with practiced silence, grabbing a hotel robe and padding barefoot to the door. My heart hammer read so loudly I was sure it would wake Mark. Bet he remained dead to the world, exhausted from his evening of networking. Hallway was empty, dimly lit, and I felt like a ghost haunting the corridor. My own life, the soft knock. Came exactly 10 minutes later, I opened the door to find Grayson, still dressed but disheveled, his eyes dark with the salmonade I felt consuming. We stared at each other for a heartbeat the weight off hut. We were about to do hanging between us, like a physical presence last chancey. Said quietly, we can still walk away from this, pretend it never happened. Beauteven. As he spoke, he was stepping into the room, his hands already reaching Falm. I closed the door behind him, the soft click of the lock sealing our fate. Don't want to walk away, I whispered Anthon. His mouth was on mine, fierce and demanding, months of frustrated desire exploding between us. He lifted me, easily carrying me to the sitting area, away from the bedroom where Mark slept, his sleeps never leaving. Mine this time there was. No hesitation, no stopping his hands, worked the belt of my robe with urgent efficiency, the silk falling away to reveal my naked body beneath. He groaned at the sight, his eyes drinking in every curve, every line as if he was memorizing. You're incredible. He breathed Hessians, skimming over my skin with reverent touches that made me shiver. I reached for his shirt, desperate to feel skin against skin, to erase the barrier between. He helped me, shrugging out Ophis' clothes with an efficiency that spoke of barely leashed control. When he was finally naked before me, I took a moment to appreciate the masculine body. His body, lean muscle broadshoulders, the evidence of his desire Falm impossible to ignore. He lowered me tough plush chair, his body covering Menaeus's mouth, found my throat, Michael Arbone, the sensitive hollow between my breasts. Every kiss was worship. Every touch designed to bring me pleasure. Hishans explored my body with Atherois that left me gasping, finding sensitive spots. I'd forgotten Existate, creating new ones with his skilled touch. His fingers finally found the heart off my desire. I had to bite my lip to keep from crying out. He was gentle but insistent, building the tension within me with patient skill. Let go. He whispered against my ear, let me take care of you, let me give you what you need. His words were as potent as his touch. Permission to abandon the control lead. It's maintained for so long, to simply feel and accept and take the climax, built slowly, then crashed over me with devastating intensity. I buried my face against his shoulder to muffle my creasy body, shaking with the force of release. He held me through it, whispering genders, his hands soothing, even as they continued to stoke the fire within him. But he wasn't finished with me. As the aftershocks faded, he repositioned us, his smith, replacing his hands, and I nearly sobbed. From the intensity of sensation, this was beyond anything I'd ever experienced. Not just the physical power, though that was overwhelming, but the emotional connection, the sense of it. He truly saw me, truly wanted to give me everything I'd been missing. When finally rose above me, positioned himself at my entrance, we both paused, recognizing the significance of firmament. This would change everything, cross a line we could never uncross. High sighs searched mine, looking for any signal of doubt, any hesitation. I need you, he whispered, the admission torn from my soul. I need this. I need you. He entered me, slowly, carefully, his eyes never leaving mine as our bodies joined. The sensation was indescribable, not just physical pleasure, though that was exquisite, but a sense of completion, of finding something I hadn't even known I was missing. We moved together with our rhythm that felt both new and ancient to her, bodies communicating in ways that transcended words. He was gentle yet passionate, tender yet demanding, giving back exactly what I needed in every moment. Connection between us was electricivary touch, sending shockwaves through me system. Every kiss deepening the bond being forged between us. Time becoming meaningless. There was only sensationing, the dance of bodies and souls finding each other in the darkness. Whence final wave of pleasure crashed over us both. We collapsed together, breathing hard, hearts racing in sync in aftermath. As we lay entwined on that care, reality began to seep back in what I'd done. I was a married woman, Amathor, and I just committed the ultimate betrayal with my husband sleeping a mere yards away. The guilt was crushing. but beneath it burned something of fierce joy, a sense of awakening that I couldn't entirely regret should go. Grayson said finally, though made no move to release me before he walks up. I nodded, knowing he was right, but unwilling to break the spell that surrounded us. This stolen moment felt too precious to end to perfect toral gate to memory will. I see Yao again. I asked Hayton how vulnerable the question made me sound. He tilted me chin up, his eyes serious as they met mine. Do you want to? The question hung between us, loaded with possibility and danger. I thought of Mark, of our children off. The life we'd built together, then thought of how. Grayson made me feel alive, desired, cherished in ways I'd forgotten were possible. Yes, he whispered, sealing my fate. God help me. Yes, he dressed quickly, pausing to kiss me one last time before sleep from the room like a ghost. I sat alone in the chair where we'd made love, my body still humming with satisfaction, mimicked reeling with the implications of what we'd done in a few hours. Mark would wake up excited about his potential dialogue, knowing that his wife had just embarked on an affair that could destroy a very thing. The next morning arrived with brutal clarity. Mark was indeed excited, chattering about follow-up meetings and projected timelines as we packed our bags. I went through the motions of being a supportive wife, but my thoughts were consumed with Grayson. The way he touched me, the promises implicit in his gaze, the dangerous path we'd started down together at the airport as we waited for our flight. Mark's phone rang. It's Grayson, he said, excited lions whirring immediately. I watched Miospan's face transform as he listened out, his excitement growing with each pausing second. Yes, absolutely, we can make that work. Thank you, Grayson, this is incredible news. Hung up, practically vibrating with joy. He's in. Mark said, grabbing my hands. Full investment, every we asked for and more. We did at Ava. We actually did it. He kissed me hard right there in the crowded terminal, and I tasted triumph on his lips. Triumph built on a foundation of my betrayal. That's wonderful. I managed my voice steady despite the turmoil in my chest. You deserve this success, and he did deserve it. Mark was a good man, a DeVita husband and father, and his dream was finally coming true. The fact that it was built on my infidelity made the victory bittersweet, tainted with guilt and deception as our plane lifted off from Vegas. I stared down at the city where my life had irrevocably changed. Somewhere below, Grayson was probably already on his way to his next business meeting, his next conquest, but the memory of his touch lingered on my skin, the echo of his words still resonating in my heart. This wasn't over, couldn't be over, not when I'd finally found someone who saw him as more than just a supper tinker actor in someone else's story. Theft flight home was torture. Mark spent most of it on his laptop, already diving into work that Grayson's investment would make possible, while I sat beside him, drowning in guilt and desire. How could I go back to my normal life now? How could I pretend that nothing had changed when everything felt different? The woman who had boarded the plane to Vegas was gone, replaced by someone who knew what it felt like to be truly desired, truly cherished. My phone buzzed with a text, and my heart leaped when I saw Grayson's name. Business is just business. What Weshard was personal. Don't let guilt overshadow something beautiful. I stared at the message, torn between deleting I tend, treasuring it. This was the choice I've faced: return to my safe, predictable life, or pursue something dangerous and potentially destructive, but undeniably live. I thought about Mark, about our children waiting at home, about that comfortable routine we'd built together. Then I thought about Grayson's hands on me skin, his voice whispering that I deserved to be were ripped, the way he'd made him feel like the most important person in his world. The plane touched down, and real life rushed back to meet us, but as I walked through the terminal beside my oblivious husband, I knew that something fundamental had shifted. I tasted freedom, experienced passion, remembered what it felt like to be truly alive. The question now was whether I had the courage to pursue it or the strength to walk away. So tell me, if you were in my position, caught between duty and desire, between the safe choice and the dangerous one, what would you do? Will do? Risk everything for a chance at real passion? Or would you stay faithful tough life you'd built? I'm genuinely curious. Bet your thoughts because honestly, I'm still figuring it out myself. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and if this story left you wanting more, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications because trust me, this is just the beginning. Things are a get a whole lot more complicated. Thanks for listening.